You could use okay, so I'm talking to a
Hello, good evening. Welcome to this month's Pulse on Property with myself, Michael Holliday, the investment manager of Residential Estates. Joining me this evening, we have two of our senior investment consultants. I have James Davis to my right.
Hello.
And Chris Smith
Hi,
to my left.
Hi guys, yeah.
So between the three of us, we'll be going through the usual property news, latest trends, but also join us this evening. Delighted to say we have Melissa Ellis from HL Financial. So she's joined us remotely, but you are actually in, well, your company's in Chester, isn't it? So you're not too far away from where we are anyway. So, but yeah, thanks very much, Melissa, for jumping on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So as I said, Melissa covers all things pension and pension planning, and you've got a section, haven't you, later, Melissa, that you will run through.
I have, yes.
But any questions you have in the meantime in our section that you want to ask Melissa, feel free to do so. And I believe some of you have sent through questions already, so I think you have some answers prepared, don't you, Melissa?
I do.
To go through all that as well. And likewise for ourselves, if you've got any questions throughout the evening, feel free to ask it. We like it, don't we, when it's interactive and people are popping up. So whether you're watching on Livestorm or YouTube, use the chat section, use the question section. And we are trusting James to pass through those messages this evening. So
if I'm looking away, I'm just checking the messages coming through. So
the pressure is on him. So let's get things started. So in terms of contents and what we plan to cover this season, as I say, we will go through the latest property news, in particular PBSA and student accommodation, and there's been a lot of demand, hasn't there, that's increased recently that we want to run through on it. Then we'll talk about mortgage rates. We know it's all over the news at the moment, so we'll tackle some of those questions on that and where we think the rates are going to go with the Bank of England.
I think that's a big one at the moment.
Yeah.
I think what's on everyone's mind is mortgage interest rates.
Yeah.
Everyone's sort of up in the air in terms of forecasts as well, aren't they? So it'll be an interesting one to delve into.
Something you guys get asked an awful lot, don't you, at the moment? And then something we cover every month is rents and house prices and where we think they're going. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball, but we can look at what some of the experts think and where we see the latest trends on it. So we'll go through that. And then we've got a little section on the Leasehold Reform Act, which some of you may know, but it's worth listening in later on, particularly if you've got a leasehold property yourself or you may be looking at one.
That's another big one. Not a lot of investors out there at the moment in the UK are fully aware of what the lease reform, what happened in government last year. It was around June, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is when it happened. So again, that'll be another thing, a bit of an educational tip of what to look out for with new leasehold properties.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kick things off, and firstly we're going to talk about PBSA, so purpose-built student accommodation, which for the three of us is something we've been involved with for the last 10 years, haven't we? Selling an awful lot of student property, and a lot of it's changed, but one thing that's been the same is the demand, hasn't it, for it has grown and grown, and these two stats that you can see on the slide here just back that up. So this one, the first one, as much as 75% of all purpose-built student accommodation has already been taken up for next academic year for this September. And there are 3.5 students now for every bed in purpose-built student accommodation, which is quite remarkable, really.
I think the big reason for this, I think the two big factors. One is lockdown. I think a lot of people who were due to start educational courses in universities were sort of not back, or they were trying to be accommodated by online courses. They couldn't do that, so there was a massive. If you remember on the news, a lot of students were doing strikes at the time because they couldn't get onto the education. So a lot of students for that year even travel. I mean, a lot of students do decide sometimes to travel. I think that is part of the reason that started trying to catch up with itself. Effectively, we're 2 years behind.
Yeah. Well,
so we've got a lot of students backfilling that. The second reason...
I was going to do a stat, Smithy, to back up your point there.
Oh, go on.
So there's actually 30,000 students that deferred that year, you're right, because of COVID,
wow.
which is incredible, isn't it? On top of all the other people that would have come in anyway.
Well, I think people weren't going to pay, were they? Didn't want to pay £9,000 a year's worth of fees and £700 a month for accommodation to sit in a room and do it by Zoom. I mean, you might as well. You're not doing this. You're not doing the whole student thing now, are you? Might as well be at home.
And I think as well, James, you're right. I think because we're heavily involved with student properties and student investments. I like, for example, Stoke-on-Trent, the stuff we've had in Preston that's been quite successful. If you look at these sort of areas, these new universities like UCLan, This is quite a central Lancashire university. They've just started. They've had a £200 million revamp with new media hubs, new engineering sector, and same with Stoke-on-Trent. You've got David Attenborough's life science, a new educational wing down in Stoke-on-Trent. So you've got all these new educational wings, all these new courses. Obviously, the back end of the 2-year lockdown has obviously prevented students from attending university. Now you're just getting an overflow of students, and I don't think it's going to take a while. I think to sort of catch up with itself.
I think overseas students as well. I can't remember the exact stats, but I know Mike, you've said about the 30,000. But even up until last year, I've read that overseas students are obviously a massive part of the university system in the UK, but it dropped hugely until basically now because of COVID.
And particularly PBSA, isn't it? We know a lot of overseas parents prefer their kids, don't when they're coming out to the country, to a new country, they like these purpose-built blocks where it's safe, secure. And I think that's partly why we've seen a lot of HMO landlords slightly go out of business or look for other angles for their property. Licenses have got tougher, there's new regulations. It's just put a few off, which is mean there's more accommodation needed, as well as more people coming
The local councils are trying to drive the student out of the residential areas. So typically students would be, on these rows of terrace houses, wouldn't they? And they make a 2-3 bed into a 6-bed property, but they wouldn't even have a lounge. And then that was the model. And obviously, but you could have a residential family next door, you could have an older couple next door. So what they're doing is trying to drive them to these purpose-built and keep the students within one area, which makes sense. If we've got a shortage, can't build enough houses, you're releasing these student places to residential buyers, aren't you?
And I think backing that up as well, James, the government aren't putting enough money in. It's as simple as that. I mean, we've seen it with these plans on new homes that they're clawing back on. Obviously, plans with student accommodation. I mean, most of the purpose-built student accommodation we get involved with from private developers who have got planning through with the council. Some of our sites as well are accredited to actual university because the university are crying out for this accommodation. So I think that's what you're finding as well, a bit of a all-rounder type of thing. Obviously looking in the right areas, but more student areas like Stoke-on-Trent, your Printworks in Preston and things like that, it's not even going to fulfil the actual need for properties in these areas, is it? So,
and because of that, rents have gone up, haven't they? Because management companies can do that. They can put it up. They know the demand's still going to be there for it. So all of this makes it why it's still a lucrative investment.
Your second and third year students don't even normally get a sniff of today. It's normally you apply to university, you get your place, and then these PBSAs get offered to first year students, and the only really second and third year students who stay there are the ones who've extended it.
Well, it's like the Keele University. They'd only have 2,000 beds for the 12,000 students, and it's only the first year students that can stay on campus.
Okay, fine.
You have to go off campus for it. So, and that's just one example. As other
and I imagine
stories.
they're all the same.
But you're right, Chris. It's normally the sort of secondary locations, isn't it, as opposed to your big cities.
Yeah, exactly. Like people, I mean, I speak to a lot of investors, especially down south around London, sort of area, who are obviously looking to plan to invest in the north. When you're telling them areas like Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle-under-Lyme, or areas like that, even Preston in some cases, where they're like, "Oh, where's that?"
They know Manchester and Liverpool, don't they?
Exactly. And I suppose, I mean, we're the same. We're northern lads. If we're looking down south for someone says a name, I mean, I didn't know where Aldershot was the other day. I was like, I'm sure I've been in Aldershot a few times, but it's one of them, isn't it? So you're right. It's not just the Manchesters, the Birminghams. It's actually a pinpoint and looking into these areas of where the demand and supply is.
Because the rents are often the same, aren't they? But obviously your purchase prices can be double, so it's easy to see why the yields are higher in the north. So it's it comes as no surprise, should we say, that the demand's there.
Not at all.
And it's why us as an investment company are focused on purpose-built student blocks, and I know other companies do as well. So that's the PBSA, latest news on that. On to mortgages, which, as we say, we know is in the news a lot. I know you guys get asked an awful lot of what people think will happen. So we actually sit on the panel, don't we, of the Bank of England every quarter. So we get a little bit of an inside knowledge of where they think it's going to go. So it's really useful for us to see that. And obviously last year there was all talks about it was going to exceed 6%, the base rate, which was a little bit worrying. However, it now seems to be this light at the end of the tunnel. And experts and the Bank of England don't believe it will reach as high as 6%. Now, that being said, we are expecting to see a little bit of an increase. I think this Thursday, the next announcement is...
I think they're saying 4.5% is going to be the peak. But
it's 3.5% now, isn't it? So we're going to see it jump up a little bit on it. But as I say, it's not going to go as high as they first predicted. That seems quite clear across the board on it, and it's reflected in that there's a number of lenders actually making cuts. So you've got the likes of Virgin Money now have made a cut of up to 0.73%. Nationwide and Halifax have cut some of their mortgage rates. So, the lenders are following suit on that, and they only follow it from the experts in the Bank of England on it.
I mean, for me, it's obviously inflation. I think everyone's got their eye on this inflation rate, not just the banks. I think the government, all of us as the public. I'm looking for a house myself at the moment, and it's putting me in the price bracket where, last year I could afford it.
Yeah.
If you're obviously not telling exact price budget of what I've got, because I know you're searching for a property, Mike, as well, in the same area. Unlikely for me, but it's 5.7% interest is some of the quotes that I was getting quoted sort of the back end of last year. It has reduced now for me, sort of 4.7, 4.8, which is factual. That's exactly the mortgages I'm getting. But even on the values that I'm looking at, I'm still sort of sitting back and keeping my eye on inflation. As soon as we see a curve in that inflation decreasing, I just think the markets will respond positively and start to calm down with mortgage rates and stuff like that. So obviously, I know we're going to go on to property prices as well later, but it's sort of 2 and 2, isn't it? Well,
I think you guys have seen a lot of clients, haven't you, recently, that are buying in cash and then looking to remortgage down the line. It seems to be a strategy a lot are adopting.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, isn't it? It's everything we say is crystal ball, but I think, as we've said, if we're all thinking and everyone's saying that interest rates are going to go down in a year's time. So I think what people are doing is a lot of my clients, a chunk of money is perhaps buying something with a little bit less value without a mortgage, and then looking to raise that finance in sort of 12, 18 months time, because everywhere, everything, I think you Google and all the news and all the press are saying 2024 and beyond, rates are going to come down.
I think it gives investors the control, Mike. Like you said, if you're buying, I mean, a lot of investors are now wanting, just go with the cash.
Yeah.
Keeping values, I suppose, between sort of 90 to up to sort of 200,000, because even those properties now on the market are still affordable, even at the rates that there are. If you start talking £300,000, £400,000, £500,000, I mean, we're not getting into London territory, which is millions. Then for a typical £150,000 property now, if you were to do that on a buy-to-let, that's a 5.7%, it's still £650. It's still affordable,
Still making
and that's not 4.7% when I'm getting quoted as a home buyer. So,
what's your thoughts, Melissa? You're obviously not in the property sale side of it, but financial advisor. What do you think about interest rates? Are you thinking you're saying next year it could go down, or?
Yeah, I mean, you see with the markets that, as you were saying earlier, as interest rates are rising, inflation's still here. So the Bank of England are trying to raise the base rates so that people have less money to spend.
Yeah.
So with their mortgage payments going up, then they have less money to spend on lifestyle. So going out and eating dinners out and buying, nice clothes and things like that, we have less money to do that, which will thus bring inflation down. And then, we're already seeing that, in our economy and in other economies across the world. So that should then, fingers crossed, bring the interest rates down and inflation too. So we are seeing that trend as well. With the Bank of England, it's just how long that takes, really. But it's as you were saying, it's the mortgage rates, isn't it? I think a lot of people perhaps have been on fixed rates for some time and are now remortgaging and notice such a big difference with the mortgage rates now. But hopefully, inflation comes down, which will then bring the interest rates down.
I just think, Mike, that if we speak to brokers all the time. I just think that, I know we're an estate agency company. We don't have one particular broker. I know people might think that, but we don't. We're obviously in the best interest of the client. We just want them to get the best deal, best mortgage rate. But speaking to all them, they're all under the same impression as well, aren't they? Lenders are starting to relax. I know you've not touched on holiday lets yet or anything. Mortgages in that area as well are bolstering up, becoming more competitive. But yeah, I do. I'm ready to buy a house this year. I know Mike is ready to buy a house this year. So, are you waiting?
Yeah, I think it depends, doesn't it? There's two markets, and we've said this before. You've got investment property and you've got your own residential property. As we're going to touch on rents going up and all that, and maybe low prices, it's a good time maybe to get that investment property. Is it on your residential on a real high price with high mortgages? I'm not too sure. It depends on your circumstances with it. So for me personally, it would have to be a good opportunity that way on the residential side. But the eye on the investment is like there's great opportunities that way.
I think just on mortgages as well, while we're on the subject. I mean, I don't know if you looked into it, Mike, but you can port your mortgage across as well. So if you was looking to buy, Melissa, I mean, I'm doing the same. So if I've got, let's say £140,000 left on my mortgage, I think I've still got a 4-year fixed on it because I took a 5-year fixed deal out. Luckily, I think it was 1.2. It was around that sort of rate, 1.2%. So yeah, it's a great deal. So I can then port across whatever I've still got onto the new house, if that makes any sense. So I can sell my property, port my mortgage that I've currently got, the 4-year deal. And then if, let's say, I need to borrow another £50,000 to £100,000, I'll then get the interest rate on that amount, not the full amount, if that makes any sense. And for buy-to-let investors, they should look at that as well, and should definitely look at it. If they're looking to buy a property on a mortgage at the moment, look at, or move equity around, maybe look at options of putting their... if you've got a 5-year deal, I mean, it's worth doing, isn't it? I mean, why do the whole lump sum on 4.7%?
And I think we've all as well got a little bit on interest rates. We've all got a little bit greedy as well. Like with 1% and 2% and 3%. It's still, I can remember back buy to let 7, 8, 9%. And there's rates out there now 4, 5, 6%. You're still making profit, aren't you? I think. Whilst the profit might be as much now, it's still it's still very profitable still to buy with a mortgage. But I think the 1-2% of made it a little bit bit too easy.
And for banks to make money, they've got to lend. So if that means they have to reduce the rates to encourage more people to start lending, they'll have to do it. That's how they'll be out of business. So,
but I think positive. I think we've probably seen the worst of it, and it's positive. I think going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And staying on the mortgage front, as Chris mentioned, so we specialise a lot in short-term lets, holiday lets. You'll have seen probably on our previous webinars, and this is quite an interesting stat. So when Liz Truss had a moment, shall we say, in October last year, there was actually only 26 lenders at the time offering holiday let opportunities. Wow. Fast forward to now, and you're looking at 173 more mortgage choices, which is quite remarkable, and it shows the confidence that they have in both mortgages, but the actual holiday let sector as well. These lenders actually really trust it now, and more are entering the market. When we were selling holiday let properties years ago, there weren't really any options. Whether people had to do it on a normal buy-to-let mortgage, and it's kind of mortgage fraud really on it, rather than doing a normal
cash, or maybe cash.
Or maybe cash. But there's so many more options now out there.
I remember when I first started doing, obviously, the sort of service accommodation model. I mean, there was literally an handful of lenders, weren't there?
Yeah.
Handful of lenders. The rates were extortionately high because if you're getting buy-to-lets, let's say 3.5. The holiday let packages were like 5-6%. Even then, I mean, at the rates that they're currently at. Obviously, it covered different insurances. That's what they're obviously claiming. But no, as you said, Mike, I think it's becoming so competitive. I mean, to go from an handful of lenders to 411 lenders that are out there at the moment. Some of you big lenders as well. We've seen it with as well. So
they're always a couple of years behind, aren't they, the banks, to a new trend, isn't it? Because they really need to trust it, so it takes a couple of years to get it up, and then they get into it. So
the lenders know, don't they, that what's happened post-COVID is more of a demand for leisure people to not stay in hotels in there and have their own space, and then corporate companies are working from home have got rid of a lot of the head office. They've centralised the hubs, and they've got more demand for short-term corporate accommodation for 2 weeks, 1 month. When they meet up, they go on a course, don't they? Now
I was forever saying to you, Mike, isn't it? Even back then, when there was literally an handful of lenders, it was like there's such a huge market here. Such a huge market from a lender's point of view. If you come in as a lender, you was doing 5% interest rate. The amount of business they would have got through the door in terms of finance packages, it was unbelievable. So it's something I sort of visioned that was going to happen. We all did. We all knew eventually. It was inevitable that lenders had to come to the market, be more competitive, even with the interest rates now for a holiday let package to versus a buy-to-let package. The rates are virtually the same now, so there's no longer that huge difference in interest rates. So I can only see good things happening with it in terms of it's becoming
more internet.
I mean, your experience, Mike, with your service accommodation in Chester. I mean, they offered you a product, didn't they, on buy-to-let, even though it's holiday let. So.
No, absolutely, and interesting actually. Some lenders now allowing clients, would you believe, to use Airbnb on a residential mortgage. Right. So, and it's quite a big known. It's the Barclays Bank are now offering that to clients. It's no more than 90 days. Yeah. But let's say, I don't know, someone was going travelling maybe.
Going away for work.
Going away for work, and they thought, well, what Barclays are allowing is them to actually put it on Airbnb. and let it out as a holiday let.
Yeah.
Now, that's maybe start of a new trend. Are we going to see more of that? So the Barclays sort of saying we don't want you to do a normal buy-to-let, but we've got confidence in a holiday let and a short-term let, which is interesting. There could be more follow suit on that.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah. I suppose if you're going to be away for like half the year, or is there a restriction? Is that 90 days?
90 days is the max.
Is the max?
Yeah, the max days you can be away for it.
Yeah.
So I guess you couldn't do it as a whole year thing of it. But,
So it's another source of income, isn't it? I mean, especially with mortgage rates, it's probably another way of going, look, well, earn a bit of income. If you're not going to be in it for a month or two, why not? Get it all set up.
And just on the Prime Minister front, Melissa, did it have much of effect with you, all the changes last year? Because we certainly did.
Yes, 100%. The markets didn't react well to the mini budget. It was quite a difficult time, I'd say. As kind of the FTSE 100, you saw quite a negative turn from it. But then when kind of it came back, it always does. Kind of rest comes back to the markets. But it's interesting actually listening to the buy-to-let and the holiday-let mortgage options. Are they quite similar in how the mortgage lender lends the money and what they're expecting, from the rental yields and things like that? Are they available as kind of streamlined as what? Because a buy-to-let, to me, I think, you can get a buy-to-let quite easily. Is a holiday-let mortgage the same?
I mean, deposit-wise, I think you're probably, we're mortgage advisors, but you're probably looking at 30% deposit rather than 25%. And I'd probably say, from my experience the last few months, not much more than a percent difference.
No.
I mean, the stress test, they do stress test it, Melissa, very similar. So they were looking at, you were trying to get a buy-to-let mortgage now. I mean, the stress tests have become a bit more tighter, as you can appreciate, because the rates have increased. Most properties, your buy-to-let rental income will just cover your mortgage. So obviously that's why we offer different strategies that are out there for investors to profit. But the stress test is very similar. So if you're doing a holiday-let package or a specialist finance, is some of the deals that we do recommend for clients as well. They will stress test it. They'll calculate. We use software, for example, called dynamic pricing. So it'll calculate the last 12 months, the previous 12 months nightly rates. So this is factual amounts of nightly rates that have been booked, physically booked, and then it'll give a lender, that's the average nightly rate throughout the year. This is what we're going to expect. So they do stress test it as such.
And sometimes sometimes you'll have to have two management companies, so it's not biased if you like. So sometimes we'll have that where two will put.
But put it this way: over the last 6 months, I've had buy-to-lets fail on the stress test, but not on short-term lets. I can't think of any short-term lets where the stress testing is.
Well, I think it's going to it's going to be a bit of time before they relax. They'll be like, hold on a minute, we're getting no finance products through because of the stress test, but there's nothing we can do about the interest rate at the moment. Well, you're right. Yeah, you're right, James. I've seen more short-term lending or specialist finance go through, other than
because the yield's a lot higher, so it's fitting, isn't it?
And they've got two options. They can do it as a holiday let, or you can do it as a normal resi buy-to-let, as opposed to just a resi buy-to-let where it's just one option. That's the sort of beauty of short-term lets and holiday lets, which we could talk about all night, and we have done in the past.
It's another webinar.
Right, moving on to house prices and where we think, or where they are currently at the moment. So you can see on that stat, so technically speaking, for the fourth consecutive month, house prices had dropped, albeit a very small amount. However, when you look at it from an overall year point of view, there was still a 2.8% growth, according to Nationwide. And Smithy, you've looked at this, and that is an average, isn't it? So that's including the likes of London and places like that.
Yeah, I think people need to. Yeah, I think this is what not one of the things that I don't like about the news or news reports as such, or these articles, is that when they do factor in London, and London will take up a large chunk of any decrease in the market. London is effective. I mean, these London investors, not obviously to scaremonger or anything like that, but they are affected first. It's the first place to get affected by any sort of property price. I mean, especially mortgage rates. If you're trying to get a mortgage in London at the moment, and I feel sorry for any first-time buyers in London, trying to mortgage a £2 million apartment or on a 4.7% interest rate, it's the monthly payments are astronomical. So it's a massive amount of money. So I do see like the likes of London, your big, your premium properties, your £500,000 apartments, and even some of your well sought after £1 million housing estates. I feel like those are the biggest areas that are going to be affected. In my opinion, when we're looking at it from a personal point of view, it's just common sense.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get a mortgage on a higher value of a property, you're less likely to proceed on it. I mean, we all get buyer's nerves. We are doing it ourselves this year, Mike. I mean, both of us are doing exactly the same thing. We're a little bit like, it's no longer £1,200 a month. It's now £2,500 a month. So, and double the amount of money, isn't it? So
no, absolutely. And nationwide, we're saying that London was one of the few areas that saw the most properties sell for less than their asking price. So most, and certainly where we've looked, in Chester and places like that, sell for more asking price, even still now, because of the demand we mentioned of it. Whereas London.
And if you keep it really simple, what Chris is saying, aren't you, is, if prices were to drop 5% this year, if you're buying a £2 million house, you're going to be a bit nervous and hold off, aren't you?
Yeah.
But if you're buying a 90, 100, £110,000 buy-to-let apartment that's already reduced, or even if it's not reduced, to drop 4 or 5%.
But it just can't connect.
You're not losing much, are you?
And we touch on it a lot, but demand is such a big factor in it. We talked about it with student property, and it's the same with residential property. The amount of people looking for houses or to upgrade or get a bit bigger, it just means that it can't allow prices to drop that much because everyone would pile into the market.
I don't think we can forget overseas investors as well. I think.
I mean, if we look at the likes of the northwest, the northeast of England, they've seen an increase of over 2% in the last 4 weeks. Never mind the year. So we can't discard these areas that are growing in value. Yeah. If you're looking for a property price, as I mentioned, between 90 upwards of £200,000, those properties are still affordable. For first-time buyers, they still make sense from an investment point of view, depending on the strategy that you've chosen. So that side of the market, the bottom end of the market, I can't see it being massively affected. However, I know we talk from a buyer's point of view. If we're talking from a seller's point of view, and you do own £1 million house, and you've still got quite a lot of that money still on finance, if you're coming towards the end of that term this year, you're a bit like, so would you look to sell? Would you look to downsize? Would you look at maybe put it, to cashing in on what you can get for the property, downsizing into a smaller area, because you don't want to be hit with a 5% interest rate on a £700,000 mortgage. So these are the things where and properties, if they're putting it on for that price and it's not selling, and you're in a bit of a rush, you're gonna decrease it. It's common sense. To me, it's common sense when I look at it.
It's definitely affecting the residential more than the buy-to-let investment market.
Yeah,
definitely.
Which does lead on to the next slide, James. And in terms of rents, and we've seen a big increase again in rents. It carries on, doesn't it? I mean, last year, according to this, it was 11.1% increase. They're expecting that to rise to 12.9% this year. Increase.
I could just see it being higher. I mean, I'm sure you agree, Melissa. I know it's bad saying this, but it does fall on the tenant. These inflation rates, these cost of living. I mean, you're seeing strikes now across Britain, like the NHS and things like that. Because unfortunately, if you're a landlord and you get a mortgage bill of 5.7%, you've gone from paying £600 a month upwards of nearly £1,000 a month. You're going to do whatever you can to make sure that mortgage bill's paid, and you're going to increase your rent. It's as simple as that. It does fall on the tenant, unfortunately. I know the government mentioned about trying to cap landlords on increases, but I just can't see how it's going to be possible. But as it stands now, I mean, that's from last year's figures. I think if we did that now, it'd be a lot higher than what it is.
I sold a property just a couple of properties just before Christmas in Preston. Where the rent £130,000, where clients were expecting to get £700 for it. That's what we're expecting to get for it, and they're getting £850 now. 2 months later, the rents have gone up by £150. It's madness, isn't it?
Well, partner done the same. It was the end of, was it last month? It was, it was end of. So Christmas, we decided we were going to put one of the properties on buy to let. We did it. I know the mortgage is worried a little bit. She's only got a year left on it, so. We did the market comparable from last year's, lets that were agreed. I think we all do it as property-minded people. We look at what was let agreed. And it was around sort of 600 to 650 max. And I just said, look, with your worry about the mortgages, try 750. Within 1 week, it was let. And it's let to a company, isn't it? An actual company have put, tenants in there at the moment. But just that, she couldn't believe it. I mean, obviously, she's not property-minded. She's a teacher, so... but just putting that.
Our lettings department, we take something on. It's not round, is it? Like, I don't know, a week is it?
No, it goes at the same day. Just the amount of people getting through. I mean, we've obviously seen the likes of the short-term let market increasing, which again has probably taken some of those properties away from the standard rental market. So, it's easy to work it out. Those rents going up, price is still not too bad. That's why I always divide the two: investment property and residential.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a bad thing if prices drop and rents continue to go, because there you have it.
I do think, for example, the interest rates. I know there was a big meeting last year in government with all the heads of bank, and then what shortly followed after this was all the higher interest rates. So I just think we need it. I do think these. I mean, obviously, I know we're looking for a property, Mike. We're sort of like, I hope these £500,000 houses or £1 million houses do drop, because you're like, right, I can get a decent deal. So there are people like, I know investors are probably looking out. If you're looking anywhere between sort of 300 up to $1 million, of course you're going to be waiting, thinking, I might get that extra 10% reduction. But yeah, I do think we need it. We need inflation to drop. That's the one I'm keeping my eye on. As soon as that starts to curve, which it did, it went from 11.5, I think, down to 10.5 a few weeks ago. I'm keeping my eye on that, because I know when that starts to decrease, that's when you'll get a positive impact from the mortgage rates, etc.
I completely agree with that. I think, because it's the same in our job as well. You see, once you get one piece of good news, it just spirals. Then it spirals into a good way of the markets react really well to it. Bond yields react well, and then you see like Nationwide coming through saying, we've got new rates coming through. They tend to be lower. And it's just that piece, as you said, James, that piece of good news that we'll need. And I think that will come. I think that, people have had a lot of excess spending, don't mention it, but COVID, we all saved a lot of money, and now we were allowed back out again to enjoy meals and things like that. We did go last year. So inflation was just raising and raising and raising. I think now we're in a stage where things are going up. And once that starts coming down, hopefully, it should have a positive effect on mortgage rates, property values, the stock market and things like that.
I think the problem is as well, it takes a while, doesn't it, to filter through to the news. So, they have to wait till they've got enough stats before they can do a news story.
Good news, do they?
But once it's in the news, you're too late then, really. Now's a good opportunity. You can see rates are going to eventually drop. And when that does happen, everyone's going to pile back into the market. Prices are going to go really high, and people are going to look back and think, well, maybe I should have done it a few months ago. It always happens. We had it with the stamp duty breaks, we had it with Brexit. You're right, Melissa. There's always something, isn't there, in the news that just stumbles the market a little bit. But those who are brave and think, right, now is actually the time, I'm going to, jump at the chance.
I mean, I've got clients out there, Melissa, now that I've been speaking to for a number, 5, 6, 7 years now, and there's been a recession every year. There's going to be a market crash every single year.
100%.
I mean, I love my partner to pieces, but she's exactly the same. There's going to be a recession. Should we let the property out? And I'm like, just relax. Do the common sense thing. The common sense thing is keep cheap, get the rents coming in. Even if I know back in the day, James, you'll probably agree with me that rents did cover the mortgage bill. Like you said, interest, and people are happy with that.
My first buy to let, I had to pay money out my wages because the rent was not covering it. 25% deposit down. No, the rent
was down Bristol.
I had to pay money in.
But it's just so for me, I do think the lower end of the market won't be affected that much. And as long as you're investing the right way and you've chosen the right strategy, there's still profit to be made out there. I mean, per month.
It's interesting what you just said as well, Mike, then on people missing the boat, because we always say in the stock market, when everything's going up, everyone wants to get in. But when the stock market goes down, it's like, oh no, it's too much risk.
It's the same with property, exactly the same.
It's all about time scale. We say if you've got a long time scale, 5, 10 years plus, you can enjoy the volatility, because with ups comes, and downs, it comes profit. And
I've never known anyone regret buying a house 10 years ago. If you said, I wish I hadn't bought that.
No.
Well, there's always ups and downs. I think people forget that. Properties are not a 1 year thing where buy and flip. Unless you're a trader, you're a builder, you're in there to sort of make money, which is a tough market at the minute with building materials. But it's a long-term investment. I mean, a lot of our investors do have a 3 to 5 year plan where they tend to try and earn as much of the money back that they've invested, including the deposit, in rental profits, and then look at sort of capital or remortgaging after 3 or 5 years. I mean, we just mentioned cash buyers then. Remortgages now are so much easier. I don't know what it is. But I did a remortgage on my own property, didn't I, Mike, last year? I mean, luckily, that's how I locked it in for the 5 years. But last January, I locked it in at 1.2%. He just literally popped his head in the survey. He literally popped his head in. Didn't even, check the garden. I was trying to like show it off. Look at the garden, look at it. And he was just having none of it. Yeah, roughly. Give him the value. Yeah, that's about right. And the next thing it was done. I do think that there's money to still be made out there. In terms of rental profit, I do think at the lower end of the market, there's still movement. If you're in regeneration areas, you're still looking at growth over the next 5 or 10 years if you're looking at it from a long point of view. And I think there's just a lot of scaremongering. I mean, even people I speak to now, there's a market crash, there's a recession. And no doubt next year I'll probably get the same thing.
Yeah, but you should always look at it long term, shouldn't you, with property? Melissa, you'll be the same with pension planning. It is obviously a long-term strategy, isn't it?
100%. And we say that to all investors. We do a lot of due diligence with attitude to risk questionnaires, they're called, and capacity for loss, and look into the client's existing portfolio and things like that. But as you say, it's all about diversification and looking where you want that pot of money to go, and things like that. It's making sure that you've got different bits of asset classes in your portfolio so that perhaps when one's down, the other one's up, or vice versa. It's making the most of the availability that you have, really.
It's a brilliant point, and it's the same for our investors. We always say, get a mixed portfolio, so don't necessarily have all holiday lets or all student property. Mix it up, because there'll always be different sectors that do well. I'm from a farming background, and it always used to be the same. Don't just have all dairy cows. Have some beef, have some sheep, because the markets used to always be different in each one, and that's what my dad always used to tell me.
There's no different in the garage, isn't it? If you just sell petrol.
He has no milk in his tea though, Melissa, even though he's from a dairy farm.
That leads us on to a good question, actually. Hi, Sandy.
Is it a farming question?
No, it's not. No, but it's kind of links in. But thanks for the question, Sandy. Sandy Higgs asks, is there a difference in the rent increases between residential buy-to-let and student property? Would you expect similar increases in rent in a student house? So, over to you guys.
Well, I think rents in general increase a lot faster in normal times. If we forget COVID, forget what's going on with mortgage rates, student property tends to increase between 4 or 5% a year. The big reason of that is demand. Yeah. And as you can see, I think student property now and sort of rental properties, traditional buy-to-lets, are going to sort of catch up to each other. Like you mentioned, they're only sort of 12. I think it'll be a lot higher than 12% increase for the next 12 months because of mortgage payments. With student property, there's too much high demand at the moment. So landlords, and rightly so, and estate agents, universities, I mean, let's not forget, this rent is paid out of student finance. So I do see them sort of matching up over the next 12 months, if that's the question, if that's what he's forecasting. I see it to be a lot higher than 12%.
And if student rents sort of increase at the same time across the board, doesn't it? Whereas residentials, it's a bit more, it's area specific.
Competitive. It's a lot competitive, isn't it?
Yeah. So you typically you're looking at like the £160 to £200 a week. Is pretty much throughout the country, as opposed, as I say, different areas. It might vary.
Exactly. The big thing is with that. What was his name? Sorry.
Sandy.
Big thing for Sandy is the area. I mean, this is not to put doom and gloom on certain areas, but like if you look at Liverpool, there's a lot of empty properties. So as a landlord, you're probably likely to reduce your rent slightly. I mean, that was a research I did in December. That might have changed now. But this is what I mean. If you're in an area, I mean, I remember in Stoke-on-Trent where we was dealing with student properties down there. We were looking for a studio. I think we found one for let. So it just gives you a whole idea of, am I against 400 or am I against 1? And you can get an idea from a simple research on Rightmove to give you an idea on demand and supply. If there's hardly any supply, you know that you're in a comfortable area and it's going to increase. Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, good question, that one.
Cheers, Sandy. Yeah.
So, and just finally from us before we pass over to Melissa, so we wanted to just run through the Leasehold Reform Ground Rent Act, which, as Chris mentioned earlier, was on around about the 30th of June last year, and this was to set all future ground rents to zero, which was sort of bad news for those people that are looking to buy big freehold blocks and make money from ground rents, but good for your sort of average investor, the investors that we'll deal with. That meant, as I say, for all future developments, they won't pay any ground rent, or if they do, it's a very minimal amount on it, which there's a number of positives that comes with this. The big one is finance, I would say, on it. A lot of lenders do not like it when there is high ground rent. So this going down to zero is a massive impact, isn't it, on the industry that way?
And I think people will... It's a big one, Mike, you're right. And not many people are aware of this. The amount of times I speak to investors on the phone, let's say they just started searching summer last year. I think it was in June last year this came around in government. So, so just to clear it up, anyone that's looking to buy a new build property now, as of from June last year, new build, and it completes now, they're likely to not pay any ground rent whatsoever. In some cases, there has been a bit of a crossover. For example, the leasehold properties that we look at, we make sure that it's not higher than 0.1%. So if it's a £100,000 property and it's above £100 a year in ground rent, we're likely not to touch it.
Because the mortgage provider probably won't touch it.
The mortgage is the big one. The amount of people the amount of stumbling blocks we've had with ground rents from lenders, it just came around, didn't it? When I first started with property, the lenders hardly looked into leases. And obviously they look at the build, the warranty.
The problem was, wasn't there, on that they then started to double. So a lot of them had it in these contracts where the ground rent would then double. So it might have only been £300, but then it jumps up to £700. Suddenly it's become unmanageable. So that's how it then filtered through, and lenders clearly didn't like it. And I think the hope on this, and it's expected, is that they backdate this as well. So as Chris mentioned, this at the moment is for all new builds as of June last year.
And phase two will be
to going back to all the others.
It's massive.
Will have a huge impact.
I think it's massive. I think what's most important, I know that as people watching, it will be down to, can this happen now? There's a lot of investors going, I want to get rid of this ground rent. What can be done? I think eventually it will come around, and I think the ways of doing that, it could happen in multiple ways. I'm not obviously in politics, but the easy way around that is individual owners can pay a little lump sum, whether that's £1,000, £2,000 or whatever it's going to be, to get out of that ground rent, effectively becoming a part freehold, where the investors or the owners themselves, don't basically own a share of the freehold. And so we see in Scotland quite a lot. We do love leases. The reason we like leases is because all investors agree to certain clauses. For example, short-term lets. If you were a part of a freehold, it can happen where you sort of go up another investor. You might be living there.
The communal areas.
I don't want a short-term.
The gardens are clean. The gardens are clean. The communal areas are. So there's a lot of positives with leases. It's just protecting the customers a bit more and making it a bit more.
And we used to see, Melissa, a lot of pension funds that would buy in freehold, so they'd use that as an investment opportunity for ground rents. Have you come across that? Have you had any large clients that way? Or?
Yeah, there's different options to invest in property through your pension. You can invest it through, it's called an OIC or a REIT. So that's a fund base that has the property within the fund, or you can invest through direct property. That's through specific schemes called SIPs or SASs.
I think that's a big question, Melissa, that I was going to ask you actually. Is it possible? I know there's probably a lot of investors there now thinking, can I gain access to my pension? How am I going to do that? Can I do it and buy property, if that's the way, residential or commercial? We've seen it with SIP pensioners. I had an example of an investor, I think it was around sort of last year. He was trying to withdraw 50% of it on residential, 50% on commercial. Right. It was like a brainstorm to me. I didn't know, I'm not a pension specialist. So, is that a difficult process? Is it something that buyers can do?
Yeah, so you can't invest in residential property through your pension. You can invest in commercial.
Okay.
It's very specific to the client, to be honest. There are cases that you can, for example, a business owner can use their commercial property, invest it into their pension scheme, put the rental yield into his pension scheme, thus doesn't have to pay income tax on that pension, rental income, from the commercial property. So there are different areas that you can invest in property. It just has to be commercial rather than the residential. There's options, as I said, to invest through funds. So that doesn't have to be commercial, but that would be within an OIC or a fund wrapper itself, and then you'd invest through your pension. So there are different areas you can invest in with your pension, which again I would say is more the diversification route. So you've got direct property exposure, perhaps you want it, put it into a pension scheme, or have indirect property exposure through the scheme as well.
Okay, thank you. Cheers for that.
Yeah.
And that leads nicely on,
there we
Melissa, to your section. So as I said before, if anyone's got any questions, I'm sure you're happy, Melissa, to answer any.
Of course, of course.
Comes through, and as I mentioned, there's a few that I've sent through for us. So hopefully James will continue his good work.
We're up to date.
So I think I'm controlling the slides, aren't I, for you, Melissa? So just shout up when you want me to flick to the next one.
Yeah, so happy to, that's just a little introduction to me, so I'm happy to flick to the next one. I just wanted to make this more of a conversation piece, really, so if you guys have any questions following what I'm seeing, then please just let me know. I did it more on a consolidation route, because it's actually on average that around every 5 years we change jobs, and the likelihood is with those jobs we've got pension schemes. So we get a lot of clients coming to us saying, I've got statements coming through every 6 months about my pension schemes and I just don't know what to do. So we look at those pension schemes and, do extensive research on them to say, right, actually it'd be within your interest to consolidate the schemes and manage them moving forward, which then opens avenues of greater investment opportunities. So, for instance, if it's applicable, putting property into your pension or investing in property through funds and the like. So that's what we help clients do, is more plan for their retirement. So for example, if you had a client that has short-term lets or holiday lets and things like that, maybe that might be a route for their retirement, but they have these other pension schemes that have accumulated through their working life, and they could be a diversification from their direct property exposure.
And are you seeing more younger people coming through, Melissa, wanting to plan that? Has that been a change? Or
Yeah.
is it,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many tax benefits to contributing into a pension scheme. So, it's the earlier you plan, the better, because, the more money you get into the pension scheme, you don't have to kind of get to the age of, if you're planning on retiring at 55 or maybe 60, depending on when you're looking to retire, 65, 67. The earlier you can do it, the better, because then there's less rush. And also it's making sure that you're in investments that are working for you and toward your objectives, because many of these pension schemes might not actually be working towards where you want to be. So that's what we try to help clients with. Do you find that a lot of clients look for their holiday lets and their short-term lets? Do they think that that's their retirement pot?
Yeah,
or?
I think especially if they can get in there young. If they're on, like, say, a repayment mortgage with it, the earlier you can get in, the quicker you're debt-free, if you like, with it, and you can benefit from it that way. So that's why I thought it's probably the same with yourself, with younger people. If, like you say, if they plan earlier, they're going to reap the rewards, aren't they, in the future of it. I know it can be easier said than done, but, if you can do it.
I think for me, Melissa, I mean, this doesn't sound bad for pensions, but all my investors are starting pensions just not going to perform as well as what I want it to, and I want a property to basically secure my future. When I do retire, I want a couple of properties where they can enjoy themselves, because you've got to look at cost of living, you've got to look at all these sort of factors that are happening at the moment. People are panicking. It's probably why we are getting younger people through who talk about stuff like that. But that is probably one of the main. Yes, we all want to enjoy income and be financially free, but the end goal is that retirement and using it as a pension. So yeah, you're completely right.
Yeah, I think that's from our side as well, is that it's kind of that diversification route of, as one, because perhaps all times property, could at some points maybe go down or what have you, so then this pot may be going up, so it kind of cancels out, so that when they do come to retire, their plan still remains the same. Their standard of living isn't going to dramatically drop when they retire, because income, your expenditure is going to go up. Likelihood is it'll go up in your retirement because you've got more time to enjoy. So it's planning for that as well, and making sure that your provisions that you have are going to supplement that standard of living.
I have quite a lot of questions from clients then around about the 25%, taking the 25% cash lump sum. So say Joe blogs and he's got 400,000 in his pension, he can take £100,000 cash free, and obviously I always ask the reasons for doing that, and obviously I like them doing that so I can sell them a property, but the reasons they're doing it is because then they said they've got a legacy to pass on to, whether it's the children, in that, in the sense of, I presume pensions go when you go, when you go they go, but obviously if you take the money out, is that the case? Is it? Or
no, so it actually depends on the scheme that you're invested in. So for example, I don't want to get too technical, please stop me if I do. But what's called an annuity, so that gives you a guaranteed income for life.
Okay, yeah.
And a final salary scheme that also gives you a defined income for life. They will, in the likelihood, pass away with you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get spouse benefits, but the likelihood is they will. Whereas with defined contribution pensions, so for example, a SIP, a self-invested personal pension, that's a defined contribution scheme. They don't die with you.
Okay.
You can actually nominate them for whoever you wish. That's actually out of your will as well. It's called an expression of wish form, and that's actually not included in probate. So that form basically stands the day you pass away. That pension then goes to your beneficiaries. With you saying the 25% tax-free cash, that's the more streamlined. So in these post 2016 when the pension ruling came in, that's the 25% tax-free cash tends to be the rules for now. You do have some schemes that, for instance, pre-2006, some of them offer more generous tax-free allowances. I personally have seen some schemes that have 100% tax-free cash. Caveat that with that's not often you see that, but there are some that have guarantees of that sort. So it's all about looking at the pensions you've got, because you might actually have a lot more than you think you've got. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. It's good.
Did you want me to switch to the next slide, Melissa? I'm like Matt Hancock, aren't I? Yeah, next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think I just on the next slide it was about I think it was more the ethical investing thing. Sorry, my slide's a little bit more delayed. There we go. Yeah. So the tax efficient pension planning, that can be also used, as I mentioned earlier, with putting property into your pension as well. So for instance, a self-invested personal pension, you can put commercial property in, and that offers many tax benefits to it as well, that clients can benefit from. And looking more down the diversification route, if you did already have property exposure through yourselves, then if they wanted to utilize their pension scheme to expose to different opportunities, we do have ethical options as well. So it's all kind of working towards the client really, and the opportunities that pensions hold for them. So that's kind of the area that we help plan for and work side by side with the client to say, right, you've got this, you've got this, you've got this. What are you looking to do, and where's the end goal for them?
And it'd be interesting to see if student property comes under the commercial property aspect, because it often does. Have you seen that, Melissa, from your side?
So personally, no. It's something that is very case by case, and that on pension schemes, so specifically SIPs and SASs, which is where you'd invest commercial property, and perhaps the student accommodation, as you mentioned, that's down to the trustees to have a look into. So we could, it's something that on a client basis we'd look into for them, and see, is that a possibility through your pension scheme, and try and make it happen if we can.
That'd be a huge opportunity, wouldn't it, if that was possible?
Yeah.
And I constantly off clients who've got SIP pensions always looking for student property. I mean, the amount of obviously, in terms of people I contact, I always get that in terms of every time we launch a new student project, it's always, I want to buy it, but how can I get it out of my SIP pension? And it's just like, well, I can't help you, I can't, run down to the SIP office and start, talking to them about releasing funds. So it would be good that, Melissa, if we do have clients who are looking to that, you can try and help them.
I will. You have to have. It has to be quite a substantial pension, plan that you've got, because you have to have the money there so that it can buy the property. For instance, because the property is going to be held within the SIP, so you'll have to eventually buy that out for your retirement. So it's all, as I said, it's all very client specific, but there is the opportunity there. So it's looking at it and seeing, can I benefit from it? Because there's so many areas that pensions and property can save you, save you tax and planning and things like that. So it's just worth looking at if you can.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I've switched back to the slides, Melissa, but it might be taking a while for you to...
Don't worry. I think this is a slide just to where I try and kind of make, say how amazing I am at my job. No, I'm joking. It's just really about how we can, like you guys, help clients manage the properties and get the most out of their properties, how we do it for clients. And pensions, they can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of technical side to them, and it's just kind of how we can help with that and take the stress on for clients. And perhaps you might not be benefiting from what you could from your pension, so it's looking at the options available to you and thinking, why not come and have a chat and see if we can add value, which I think it sounds very much similar to what you guys are doing for your clients as well. How they can kind of enjoy the income and things like that, and not have to worry about the day-to-day of the investment.
Definitely, and I noticed how you put on your slide there a free initial consultation, which is exactly how we call it on our side, isn't it? It's consultation. It's finding out what a client's wanting to achieve and then sort of directing them the right way, and I'm sure it's the same with you. So
I've just had a question come through for you, Melissa, from Danielle, saying, can anyone start a SIP, a pension? I guess anyone can start a pension, but can anyone start specifically a SIP that would allow them to save up and buy a property?
So you arrange the setup then, Melissa, or you would arrange?
No, of course, so we can arrange setting up a pension for you, and yes, anyone can open a pension. I'd say definitely do. I mean, the specific age limits on it, so you can't, you have to be over 18, but it's available to everyone. So definitely look at it. As Mike said earlier, the earlier you start saving, the better, because you're in a better position as years go by. So definitely drop me a call.
Thanks.
No, we will, and we will send your details as well out to everyone, Melissa, on it.
Brilliant.
To everyone after this, and because some of you may have questions after this, feel free to send them through to us, and we can pass them on. I'll make the introduction. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to cover, Melissa, or is that you?
No, I'm more than that's if you have any questions or anything, please let me know. But thank you.
Well, a big thank you from us for joining us. Really appreciate it. It was actually really interesting from our side as well.
Good,
so,
really helpful.
And as always, thanks very much everyone else for joining us. We have one of these every month, so hopefully we'll see you on the next Pulse on Property. But thanks very much for joining us, and have a good evening, the rest of you.
Have a nice evening, everyone.
Cheers, bye now.
Thanks,
guys. Bye.